Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your modelers will practically build themselves. Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv and welcome back. I have a subject today that I've been looking forward to starting for quite some time. Everybody has a kit or two that they wish would be built, and I'm no exception. There's a whole bunch of things I wish that they'd put out. Anyway, every once in a while somebody will do a resin kit of whatever it is that you're interested in. The problem for me is I'm a tightwad, so I don't like spending a lot of money on kits, and most resin kits are very expensive. The other problem is with the companies that make resin, they don't last. Yeah, they'll come out with a really neat subject. Well, they'll come out with a bunch of neat subjects, and unfortunately they can't make a go of it. So they usually go out of business in a few years, and those kits are just out wherever in the cosmos, making them even rarer and making them even more expensive. So today I am going to take this, and we reviewed this about 8-9 months ago on the channel, and I'll put a link in the description to this, the review I did of this. Anyway, for years and years you've been able to get a nice fastback version either of a Mustang or of a Shelby for 67 and 68. Well, that's great, but my favorite year for the Mustang is 67. My second favorite year is 68, and I have actually owned a 67 Mustang coupe. Oh man, I loved it. But growing up, a friend of mine had a 67 California or 68 California Special. It was black and white, beautiful car, and that's in one of my videos as well. I'll try to put a link in the description for that as well. Anyway, I've always wanted to make a model of a California Special. That's awesome. But there's no coupe. Nobody makes a 67 or 68 coupe. Until a few years ago, a resin company made a body of a California Special. Awesome. And then they went out of business within a couple of years, and the kits are so rare. I mean, they're hard to find, and if you do find them, they're well over $100. So you know what? I'm sick and tired of waiting for people to make what I want them to make, you know, like a lot of modelers. I got the skills, I can do it. I'm confident I can make it on my own. But I'm not going to do a California Special today. What I want to do is a Shelby called Little Red. It was a 1967 coupe that Carroll Shelby took, and it was a kind of an experimental car, one of a kind. They put a bunch of different engines in it. Started out, I think, with a 428 dual quad, which was really cool. Anyway, they did a lot of different things with it, but it was recently found, about a year and a half ago. It was found in Texas, and it was in some little private junkyard, and it wasn't all rusted out, but it was missing a bunch of parts. It's been restored, and it's now on the show circuit. Well, it looks like the Shelby GT500, okay, except, well, it looks like a GT350, and 67 is what it looks like, but it's a coupe, one of a kind. Then there was one they called the Green Hornet, and the Green Hornet was a 68 that had the GT500 front end here, and it was a coupe, and it was painted green. Guess what I'm going to do? Well, this is a 68 kit. I'm going to do them both, but I'm going to start out with the Green Hornet, and then one of these days I'll get around to building Little Red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this nice body from this kit. Actually, I'm going to take one similar to it. I've got a spare body. I don't want to cut up this real good body, but I've got a body like this, and I'm going to cut the top off of it. And then I've been looking for a parts Mustang, and I haven't been able to find it, or a parts kit, haven't been able to find it. But I do have this Pro Street that I did years ago, and guess what? It's the donor. I'm going to cut the roof off of this, and I'm going to cut the trunk lid off of this, and I'm going to mate it to this, and we are going to make a 1968 Shelby coupe. So stick with us, folks. This ought to be a fun build. There's going to be a lot of surgery. There's going to be a lot of everything, and let's see how this thing turns out, shall we? So here's the body I'm going to start with. It's an old paint mule I have of a 68 GT 500. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the top off of this, the roof, and I'm going to cut all the way back to the spoiler on the trunk lid on this one. Then I am going to take some Easy Off oven cleaner, and I got this old box of crackers that's open, that I'm going to put this body in, and I'm going to soak it with the Easy Off. That process took a long time. I had to do it about 5 times to get all of the paint off, but it finally turned out pretty good. So I started cutting on the 66 body, and you can see where I've removed the trunk lid and the roof from the 66. Smooth out the rough edges on the front and on the sides with this Dremel tool, and then put it in place. You can see it fits pretty well. There's my my spoiler. And so now I've got this glued in place. I got the spoiler glued in place, and I can start filling with some red putty. I use red automotive spot putty, and if I need to thin it, I thin it with a little bit of preferably the Tester's liquid glue. That works good, or to me as ultra thin cement will work good to thin that out. But anyway, I start with that, and I fill in these little low areas here and there on this car. So you can see where I've had to fill, and there's our putty, getting all that in there. Once the putty dried, I would sand it with some 300 grit wet dry paper, and I had to do this process honestly about 6 times, not just in the one area, but there was a couple other low spots I would find. I wanted this body to be as close to perfect as I could get it. So I'm going to grab the hood that's in one of my kits and brand new and put that on there. And I've primed the whole thing in my 2X gray primer just to kind of see how it's going to look. And it shows me where some of the low areas still are, some of the scratches are, and that's okay. Once this is dry, then I'll go ahead and I'll come back and I'll either sand some of the scratches, or as you can see here, I've used some of the red putty and filled some of those little areas. And then what I would do is find some of these low areas, some of these dips, and I would fill them and sand them. Again, I must have gone around this thing 7 or 8 times. The spoiler was particularly difficult with me. The next one of these I'm going to scratch build the spoiler, because using the one off the Fastback kit, it's kind of high in the middle, and it gave me a lot of grief, and I had a lot of filling to do to try and get it where I was happy. So after I pretty much got this stuff done, I gave it one more primer coat on everything, and I went over that with a 3200 grit polishing pad so that my primer was nice and smooth. And once I felt that was ready for paint, well, then I got working on my vinyl top. Laid the vinyl top, I took some half round, it's like a 10 by 15 strip styrene, and just put it down in the areas where that kind of overlap is on the vinyl top. And also I used it for the trim along the bottom. I went ahead and masked everything off, and we're going to paint it. So now we are ready to spray the vinyl top. Got everything masked off. My experience with this paint has been if you don't have something masked, it's going to get there and it's really going to screw things up. So we've used Tamiya masking tape around the chrome on the windows. And I think the top is as good as we're going to get. We sanded this just a little bit with the sanding stick, with a coarse sanding stick, so it didn't stick up quite so high. We're going to use this Rust-Oleum multicolored texture paint. This is the cap, but this gives us a little bit of a texture to it. And there we go. I'm just going to give it quick bursts. This stuff is pretty thick, and the thinner I put it on, the better the texture is going to be actually. You want to make sure to cover everything okay. don't want to have to do this again, trust me. And there we go. Give you some idea how it looks. When it dries, it'll give me a nice texture that looks like a vinyl top, believe it or not. I have a couple other videos, and I'll try to put a link in the description to those. A little more complete detail on it, but there you go. Okay, we're gonna let that dry, well, probably overnight. Next step. So for the next step, we're going to take some of the Mission Models Flat Black Primer. About that much. I'm going to take some of the Mission Models polyurethane additive. I'm going to put about 8-10 drops on there. That'll give me not only a hard finish, but slightly semi-gloss, slightly. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the thinner. I know that's a little bit more than is recommended, but that's what we're going to do today. Okay. Stir that up good. Make sure it's mixed good. And now we're going to take our top and just spray it with this concoction. And it looks like we got it covered good. We just want to cover it good. We don't want to get it too wet. I might have got a little wet in the back. Hopefully everything will be fine, but now we're just going to let that dry. We should be good. So there you go. Vinyl top. So here's the vinyl top, and we're going to let this dry for a day or so. And then I'm going to go ahead and get it all masked off, including all of the trim for it. And I'm going to give my base coat, which is a gold, it's a VHT engine paint, so it's going to be really hard. And I'm going to go ahead and put this on the whole thing, just a nice light coat of this gold. So that gold dried pretty quick, probably a couple hours. And well, then I mixed up my Imron. So I'm using some of the DuPont Imron that I've had. This paint's got to be, I don't know, 25, 30 years old. And it's still good paint, still viable. I painted my my pickup truck with it 21 years ago. So I mixed some of that up with the catalyst that it recommends that goes with it, and then I used some lacquer thinner to thin it. The lacquer thinner works as a retardant, so it causes it to cure a lot slower than it normally would if I was using polyurethane reducer, which I don't have for this paint. Anyway, nice, good, even coat. Thinned it out a little bit more, put a little bit more of a coat on it, and here's the result. Here's the color. Now this is going to have to dry for a week, but once it dries, it's going to be hard as a rock, and it's going to shine great. So join us for part 2, coming soon.